I like to use the term survivors of domestic violence. Victims tends to take their power away from them, I think. There aren't certain people that are going to be victims. There aren't certain people who are going to be abusers.
My abuse, if you will, prior to me going into safe homes was not physical. My husband never hit me. And so there's a big difference when you're dealing with that. And also, I didn't walk around on eggshells. I wasn't afraid of my husband or anything like that. So all that whole pattern that we talk about, it does exist. It just didn't happen for me. And it wasn't until after I left shelter that my husband actually tried to kill me. So I didn't go into shelter physically abused. I got physically abused after I went into shelter, and that was 10 months later, actually, was when my husband shot me 4 times, once in the head, thigh, butt, and foot, in front of our 3 children, and then shot himself, committing suicide, dying 2 days later.
Victims of domestic violence are surviving every day. I might consider myself a survivor now, but I was surviving every day of that relationship. So I had to become really good at navigating my own life.
I go back to that Margaret Mead quote about, that change can happen with a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens, right? And that's the only thing that's ever made change. It's always that one person or that one group that starts the ball moving forward. And I always just think it takes one person. And that's what I've heard in my career, and that's what I've heard in my personal life, that oftentimes it's one person that changes someone's life.
It started out 30 some years ago. There was a safe homes group, and it operated out of a small social services group on Grand Street. I was home with 2 little kids. I had a master's in counseling and wanted to volunteer. And I saw an ad in the paper for hotline volunteers. So I called, and I got called back. Yes, I could be a hotline volunteer. And the way it worked at the time was that phone calls would go into an answering service, and then they would be patched through to private homes. Well, within a couple of weeks, the funding for the program ran out. We had to close.
So I said, well, that's not good. I said, why don't we get together? I said, let's talk about how we can bring this back to life. Lisa and I met a couple of times, and we decided on a framework of how we were going to do that. We decided to organize a coalition against domestic violence.
Well, it turns out that at the time, Orange County was under a mandate to provide domestic violence services. All the counties in New York State were. And they said that Orange County Safe Homes were the domestic violence service providers. And finally, we were able to establish a funding stream. We went through a lot of ups and downs at the very beginning. I just asked anybody I knew, would you be on our board of directors?
Lisa Daly and I were sitting at a swimming pool, and we were talking, and she was telling me about her vision for helping women who have been victimized by domestic violence. And she was so passionate about this and was asking for people to help her. We had nothing. We had absolutely nothing but a lot of heart and a lot of guts to begin this journey. We certainly didn't have money. I think our favorite story is everything we had we carried in a shoebox.
My goal was to find a mechanism through which the agency could achieve financial stability. And my vision was that that could happen if we established a shelter. So I have the honor of having my name on the original mortgage for the shelter.
And we just continued to grow, and more people heard about us and asked to join the fight, as it were. And really, at those days, I said, well, we're going to put ourselves out of business pretty soon once we educate people about how wrong it is to hurt another person, and allow these women to see that there were places to go and ways to rebuild their lives. Of course, 30 years later, we know that that's not what happened. We have identified obstacles, and we've tried to meet those needs.
We know what it is we need to do. It's a matter of resources. So we certainly could use more funding. Any nonprofit would say that, but I think when you're working in social justice and you've got larger social issues driving the need for your services, you really need to work on things at a systemic level, and that's some of the discussion that we're having about our mission, and do we need to focus on the systemic underlying causes of intimate partner violence and teen dating violence and attack it from the roots, which takes a whole different approach. And it's not to say we wouldn't provide end services also, they're both needed. But I think there's going to come a time we're going to need more volunteers, more funding, more support from the community, understanding of the mission, which means we have to continue to do a good job of community outreach and education.
It seems like even though we've come 30 years and we've made a lot of progress, we went from that kitchen table to this organization with 40 employees and an ability to provide around-the-clock services, both residentially and non-residentially, that we still come up against every single day the myths and stereotypes and continued misogynistic, sexist, homophobic, racist remarks in this country and around the world. And until we can get a good handle on those things, the end product will always be domestic and sexual violence.
I think educating youth is, one of the most important things we can do when we're talking about domestic violence and dating violence. You know, working with clients directly is so important, but then there's also the prevention aspect.
These are the things that you should be talking about when you're 2, and when you're 5, and when you're 7, and 9, and when you're 21 years old and going off to college. It should be the very same way as we know how to write our names.
Work with young people and you tell them about these things that other people aren't talking about. It's only more information for them when they're growing up, maturing, and getting into their own relationships. So I would say it's so important. It's really important to work with youth about these things.
With the workshops that we teach, there are always survivors in the room, but there are also so many people that know somebody who's experiencing dating violence, always. There's always somebody in the room, probably multiple people in the room. It's like 1 out of every 3 teens that experiences dating violence before the age of 18.
And there's so much more to be done in terms of education and intervention and resources for this cause.
For many, many years, we had been providing services to victims of trafficking and sexually exploited youth with little to no funding. And with the amazing partnership with the local Department of Social Services, as well as my friend's house, we've been able to start the Safe Harbors Task Force and to be able to have a trafficking coordinator. And I think it's allowed us to formalize a process because the victims are out there. It's happening in your backyards. It's happening in your next door neighbor. It's happening in our schools, and we have to start talking about it. And so the ability to formalize this new position, to start doing public service announcements, to doing billboards, to being able to really raise awareness around what's happening in our own backyards when it comes to the sexual exploitation of our children and trafficking in general, is going to allow us to really start to reach those that are being victimized, because it's not where they are, it's just how we find them.
I was able to make a change in my life when I was able to learn what resources were there and how to do things differently, and what support would be there when I did. That was very important to me, and it's important to me that not just the victims of domestic violence, but their families, their friends, their employers, the people they work with, that everyone knows that things can change, and we can all make a difference in making that change possible.
Just need to keep lighting each other's flames so that we can be that one person for someone else.
I really and truly wish that the violence that people are experiencing in their lives every day could come to an end. And I know that's apple pie in the sky kind of stuff, but it's what I really, really believe. I doubt if it'll happen in my lifetime, but I'm trying to do, and Safe Homes and all their partners far and wide are trying to do, is to come up with a way to end this violence so that we really truly could put ourselves out of existence. So I guess for the short term, I want Safe Homes to be able to offer information, advice, support, physical help, education to as many people as needed. And that will hopefully at some point reach the goal of ending violence.
So it's been 30 years, and it's hard to believe that I have had the privilege and honor in 30 years to still get to meet and be connected and work alongside some of the founding mothers of this organization and still have their voices heard as we continue to move forward, which I think is extraordinarily critical when we do anything, is that we need to listen to those who came before us and those who will come after us. So I want to thank each and every one of you who have in some way played a role in Safe Homes. Whether you donated a pillow, opened your home, opened your checkbook, opened your heart, or just stopped for one moment and shared our name, thank you. Thank you to all the staff that have walked through the doors, the ones that give tirelessly day in and day out, that ask nothing in return, that at times live with some of the most darkest and horrible secrets. Thank you to the individuals that have welcomed us into their schools, into their businesses, into their communities, into their churches, into their synagogues, into their mosque. Thank you for allowing us to be a voice, for giving us space, for allowing us that opportunity to maybe impact one person's life. Thank you to the victims and survivors, for it's you that allow us to know where we need to be going, for defining where we've been, for showing us each and every single day what true strength and courage is. All of us can continue to learn. For those of you who've come before and who will come long after, you are the true champions of this organization. You are the ones that keep this running and keep us doing better each and every single day. And while we've done a lot in 30 years, it's amazing to think how far we've come. There's still so much more to do. And just when we think we've been in every opportunity, every location, every business, we recognize that we've only just scratched the surface. And so I'm going to need each and every single one of you. I'm going to need you to help us. We have to continue to talk about domestic and sexual violence. We have to continue to know Safe Homes and the hotline. We need your support. We still need your pillows or your heart or your open door or your checkbook or whatever you can give. And time is more precious than all. Whether you volunteer, whether you open the door, whether you allow us to have a meeting to talk about the funding that we so desperately need, each of you can play a role. And I hope in 30 years that some of the same faces are still here. But more importantly, I hope that we've touched more lives, that we've had greater impact, that the world is a little kinder, a lot more safer, and maybe, just maybe, we'll all be out of a job.